If the outcome that you want is for your people to stop being attacked indiscriminately, and the reason why they're being attacked indiscriminately is because you are occupying stolen land. If you want it to stop, you don't want it to happen in another year, a month, a week, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. Give the people their land back. Simple.
You have enough blood, and one drop is enough. And why are we approaching these so differently when we're talking about Native American heritage and African American heritage?
Anybody interested? Why does us Indians, out of all the people in the whole world,
United States for sure.
United States for sure, can anybody answer why we got to get registered like dogs to prove who we are? Can anybody answer that question? We got to get registered. She's got to get registered. She does. All us Indians. Can anybody answer that question?
If you don't know what blood quantum is kind of the way that Native American heritage is measured. And it's eerily similar to me to the one drop rule, which is the other side of the coin. For African Americans kind of measuring their blackness. The only difference is that with blood quantum, it's usually expressed as a fraction. And basically, it's a concept that the US government and a lot of tribal governments use to kind of say who is Indian enough, who is Native American enough, who's indigenous enough to count. On the other side is the one drop rule, which basically is what it sounds like. If you have one drop of black blood, you're black. Interesting to me that you have these two concepts here in America of do you have enough blood, and one drop is enough. And why are we approaching these so differently when we're talking about Native American heritage and African American heritage? And so obviously it's a complex and emotional issue.
Described in the 1860 census as an Indian. In the 1870 census, they're described as a person of color or a colored person. Same person, but the census taker, as part of the white dominant society, decides that this person is no longer Nipmuc. And why he decided to not call them Nipmuc people is really interesting. And for them, what an Indian was somebody who lived out in the forest, who lived maybe in a little teepee or a wetu someplace, who mainly lived by hunting or making baskets. And as he looked around at his neighbors at Hassananisco, he saw them as barbers, stone workers, factory workers, shoemakers, and he said, well, these people aren't living the way I think Indians live, so therefore I'm not going to call them Indians. I'm just going to assume that they've vanished. They're not living in the forest, so therefore they're not Indian, according to these folks.
The United States' primary interest in treaty making was to acquire Indian land. And so the treaties were used for that purpose, especially as the United States found itself in a position to pretty much dictate the terms of the treaty. And so the treaties morphed from this friendship and reciprocity sort of relationship into a very one-sided thing.
To get what they wanted, U.S. officials brokered treaties through any means available. Their tactics were so corrupt that the once trusted treaties became quickly known as bad paper.
There were people at these treaty negotiations who would do anything to get an agreement on the table. And so there was very routinely bribery, individual payments made to tribal leaders. Alcohol would be used to put people in an agreeable frame of mind, and even coercion to say to people, you must sign this agreement or else.
Every means of trickery and fraud was employed against Native nations. The United States would appoint a false leadership, people who had no right to speak for the tribe, and say, you're the leader of this tribe, sign this paper giving away all your land.
As the century progressed, the treaties became more and more lopsided, a far cry from the parallel paths of the Goswenta. As Americans successfully pushed the bounds of the frontier, they not only believed that they were destined to take over the land and prosper, They believed that God was the one who put them there to do it.
They believed that it was God's will, that the United States should be a continental nation stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. As each wave of immigration would come, they'd move into an area. The United States would then make some sort of arrangement with the tribe to get that land from them.
And the power of manifest destiny, of expansion, of inevitability, of God's providence helped to rally people around not only the idea of Americans as entitled to North America, but rallied them around the idea that Indian people were barriers to civilization and barriers to progress.
No matter how many treaties were signed or how much land they gave to the United States, the Indian was still in the way. This was known as the Indian problem. This so-called problem continued despite a decades-old policy to force Indians to swap their land east of the Mississippi for land west of it. The Indians would then move to those western parts and away from the Americans. This plan was simply called removal.
The Removal Act was the centerpiece of Andrew Jackson's political agenda, and it was very controversial at the time. It was very widely debated. There was lots of discussion across the country, and very many prominent people spoke up against it.
Will the American government steal? Will it lie? Will it kill?
We are surrounded by white people, and there are encroachments made. What assurances have we that similar ones will not be made on us should we remove to the Mississippi?
They have been at war for thousands of years against anyone that doesn't agree with them. The best we can do is keep it at bay. We're going to fight it on their shores or ours.
Give the people their land back. Give the people their land back. Give the people their land back.